Well, here it is, the Halloween special. Scene, FNAF 4, take 2, roll 1. Now, I'm gonna be honest, whenever I do the intro, every time that I mess up the intro, I end up changing the board, director's board, take up. So obviously the more takes it takes, you'll know. So this is the first time where I've actually gotten beyond 1. Like normally I'm normally able to do the intro first time. However, the only reason why this intro took more than 1 attempt is because when I actually recorded this, I effed up. Okay, see, I'm not going to explain all the stuff that I do normally before I start recording, but basically, this is how the first recording came out. Now, apart from the gameplay, let's end with exactly, I set the camera too effing low, okay? So like, just part of my hair is just cut off, and it's like, yeah, I just had to re-record all of this. Basically, this is like the next day, or I can't remember when, but like, yeah, like, long story short, hey, it's one of those, we live, we learn, we move on. But, you know, I said for this Halloween special one, or I said, more example, after the last video, that this one was going to be a Halloween special. I said it, I guaranteed it, I put it in the books. I told you this next one was going to be a Halloween special. And this one, I thought, why not, though it being the first one, be on the indie game that more or less took over my entire childhood, that being none other than Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, we're not going to be looking into the confusing lore and timeline side of things, because trust me, it gets pretty confusing. And I will just admit now, that probably will be a video in the future at some point, alright? So I'm just giving you your warning now. It definitely will happen. And trust me, like, I wish it was as straightforward as Poppy Playtime, but it's not, okay? Either way, I think it would be better if I talk about the FNAF game that actually sits near and dear to my very heart, that being none other than FNAF 4. Okay, FNAF 4, without a doubt, in my entire franchise, especially if we're talking the first 4 games, easily sits as my favorite of the 4 games. And like again, favorite probably in the entire franchise. Now, let me say this about the overall, like, FNAF games in general, okay? There has very clearly been a shift in the recent years from the classic, you know, having to look at doors and make animatronics go away by closing doors and stuff like that, to a more narrative sort of gameplay, okay? That's very clear with Sister Location, Security Breach, the Ruin DLC, Into the Pit, and even Secret of the Mimic, okay? It's very clear that the direction and the trajectory of the FNAF games has very easily changed from what we originally knew them to be. And that was during around the times where I was quite simply too young, in which I would just watch the game rather than play it because I was way too effing scared to play it. And here's the thing, I'm not complaining about it at all. Those games I just mentioned, Security Breach, Ruin, Into the Pit, and Secret of the Mimic, banger games, okay? Though they are more narrative based, banger games. And I'm not complaining about it in the slightest, and I don't think the community is either. The community has absolutely loved and enjoyed these games, and I'm pretty sure they've been pretty well received. Because if we look at the first 4 games, the first 4 games are more or less the same mechanics, but sort of just done in a slightly different way, okay? But there's a specific reason that FNAF 4 sits near and dear to my heart, but we'll get onto that a bit later on. Now, the reason why I'm not including the reason why I'm not including Sister Location is because Sister Location is sort of the bridge in which we started to lean towards more narrative-based gameplay. The regular gameplay for Sister Location doesn't follow the same structure as the first 4 games. It does still have a custom night though, but it's different to the original 4 games, which is why Sister Location, like I say again, sort of is that bridge into what led us from the original FNAF games into Security Breach, Ruin, Into the Pit, and even Secret of the Mimic. It's just been that gradual shift, which is why it kind of sits at that middle ground. And it's why I'm not including it with the first 4 games. Though it still kind of is done in the style of the first 4 games, it's not particularly made in the same way as the first 4 games. Okay, so let's start about essentially where FNAF 4 sort of is in the timeline and the overall lore of it. See, FNAF 4 takes place around 1987, and we know this because of the bite of 87, okay? You know, we're talking about the infamous bite of 87.
Was that the bite of 87?
The one where the crying child is being bullied by Michael Afton and his friends, Michael Afton literally being the crying child's older brother, is being bullied by his friends into trying to kiss the Fredbear animatronic that's on stage. Mind you, the crying child is absolutely frightened of the animatronics. We don't actually ever really know why, but we just know that the kid is frightened of them. So Michael Afton and his friends, thinking it's funny, decide to put the kid's head inside the Fredbear animatronic, in which it chomps down and leaves the kid's body motionless. Mind you, this all happens on the crying child's birthday. This is the kid's birthday, okay? And like, he's essentially just been rendered like dead, except he actually isn't. But here's the thing, right? If you're a FNAF fan, you already know this. If you're a FNAF fan, you've been known this. And if you're anyone who doesn't, look, I get it sounds kind of grim, but just honestly, just follow along, okay? Oh yeah, and that like bite of 87 that I was just describing, that event, that isn't even the bite of 87. See, the bite of 87 took place during FNAF 2, in which that took place in the FNAF 2 location by a completely different animatronic. The event I was actually describing is the bite of 83, not the bite of 87, in which the bite of 83, obviously the Fredbear animatronic did it, and it actually took place in Fredbear's family diner. Look, the funny thing is, this is like the not so confusing part of the lore. Like, this is the part of the lore that like most of the FNAF community is like set in stone with. And yet, I weren't trying to purposely like F up your mind, but like, it's one of those where I was like, I'm trying to get you, you know, I'm trying to give you an insight into just how messed up the FNAF lore can get. And I don't mean messed up in the grim sense, I mean messed up in the sense of it can get confusing. See, after the bite of 83, the crying child is taken to hospital, rightfully so, because he was just chomped down on by a massive effing animatronic. He's gonna have some brain damage. But shortly after being in hospital for some time, his father, William Afton being the father of the crying child and Michael Afton, ends up taking the child home early from hospital. Or earlier than he should have been taken home from the hospital, in which the father, William Afton, ends up making the crying child stay in his room. And this is where we get the FNAF 4 location. And this is the perspective that we're playing from. If you know FNAF 4, you're playing it in a kid's bedroom. That kid's bedroom is the crying child's bedroom. That's the perspective that we're playing from. And the two big theories as to why William Afton is keeping his son in his room is for one of two reasons. The first reason is that, well, here's the thing. The two theories behind the crying child and the whole nightmare stuff that's going on around him is the first one being that it's a dream, and the second one being that he's being experimented on by his own father. Now, me personally, I know this is going to sound a bit grim and a bit weird, but I actually prefer more the theory of his father experimenting on him. And I say that because I feel like a dream theory is just a bit of a cop-out. Just because a dream theory is one of those where like anything can happen because it's a dream. So it's one of those where like it's a bit unfair to use the dream theory because like anything can work in the dream theory. The reason why I believe that William Afton is actually experimenting on his son is because of the fact that if you go to the custom night of Sister Location, you can actually see the Fredbear plush, the very Fredbear plush that the child actually talks to. As well as that, if you input a special code, I think it's either 1983 or 1987, you get to see secret cameras of the FNAF 4 location, okay? And mind you, Sister Location is the place where William Afton has been building these animatronics, which means that he's been actively watching his son. Now, the two ways that he's been experimented on, it's either through sound illusion discs or gas, and it could even be both. Those are the theories for it. But the main idea is, with either the sound illusion discs or the gas or both, the crying child is being made to see the nightmare animatronics a lot scarier than they actually are. The whole point is that it's some sort of like a shape-shifting effect, except the sound illusion disc or the gas that's being used on the child is what is allowing the shapeshift to work, or allowing the appearance to make it seem as though he's a lot, well, the animatronics are a lot scarier than they actually are. And the reason why the father's doing this is because he doesn't want the crying child to escape from his room. In my opinion, FNAF 4 is the most unique of the first 4 games. That being that the first, 3 games more or less rely on this, to be honest, even FNAF 4, to be honest, all rely on this mechanic of having to close doors in order to keep the animatronics out. But FNAF's 4 one works a bit different. FNAF 1, obviously you have the doors and the lights, so you can see when the animatronics are there and when they leave. Then FNAF 2, you obviously have no doors, but then you also have the wind-up box that you need to keep winding up in order to keep the puppet away. And then you have FNAF 3, in which you have the sound cues that you need to use in order to keep Springtrap away, as well as make sure that you don't get jump scared by any of the phantom animatronics. And then FNAF 4 being a lot more heavily restricting on sound, and these ones, FNAF 4 being more so not actually relying on power of any sort in order to keep you alive. It's actually the first game where power is not needed whatsoever. It's quite essentially just you and your hearing and your flashlight, and obviously the doors and the closet. But in my personal opinion, it is the most unique one. And like I say again, though it does have doors and whatnot, it doesn't work the same as how, doors have worked in FNAF 1, or like any sort of electricity or power system in which you need to be careful with your resources in order to keep yourself alive. And like I say again, this is not me denying the fact that any of the other games rely on sound cues. Like, for example, FNAF 2, when someone moves in the vents, there's a sound cue. There's a literal sound of someone moving in the vent. So you know that there's someone either moving closer or moving away from you in those vents. But FNAF 4 relies strictly on sound. Nothing but sound. The entire premise of the game is to use sound. Heck, even when you load up the game, it tells you that the game is heavily relied on sound in order for you to play it. So let's start off the FNAF show with the one animatronic that actually doesn't really need sound in order for you to rely on them. That being Nightmare Freddy. Now, Nightmare Freddy actually starts off in the room already with you, and Nightmare Freddy is on the bed. Except Freddy, in order to keep Freddy from jump scaring you, you have to use your flashlight on the Freddles that spawn in the bed. Now, there's a maximum of 3 Freddles that will spawn in the bed, or a maximum of 3 Freddles that will end up being in the bed in one moment, in which if you take too long after 3 of them are on your bed to get rid of them with your flashlight, Nightmare Freddy will jump scare you. But as long as you keep on flashing your flashlight at the bed whenever you hear the Freddles there, then you'll be fine. However, the Freddles, you don't need to rely on sound for this one, as they can also affect? I cannot speak today. They can also affect your flashlight, meaning that you can notice it because your flashlight will start to flicker, allowing you to know that the Freddles are on your bed. Then there's Nightmare Foxy. Now, Foxy actually starts outside of the bedroom. However, Foxy will quickly be running from side to side trying to get into the bedroom. And now at this point, your whole point is to essentially keep Foxy out for as long as you can. But to be honest, it's pretty inevitable that Foxy will end up in your room at some point. Now, the whole point with Foxy is that once he's in your room, there's no getting him out. Okay, he stays in there for the rest of the night. And what Foxy essentially does, the first time that Foxy enters to your bedroom, they make it obvious with the closet door opening and closing. At that point, you need to go to the closet, shine your flashlight to see what stage Foxy is currently in, and then you need to close the closet door until Foxy transforms back into a plush. And like I say again, Foxy will stay in the closet until the end of the night. However, when you progress to the next night, Foxy will start once again outside of the room. So that's the 2 easier ones out of the way, but what about the 2 other stars of the show? You know him, I know him, and to be honest, we both probably hate them more than we hate Foxy and Freddy. It's none other than Nightmare Bonnie and Nightmare Chica. So how do they work? Now, Nightmare Bonnie works mainly on the left side, and Nightmare Chica works mainly on the right side, similar to the first game. And the premise for these 2 is that essentially the whole mechanic is that you have to go to a door, either left or right, and you wait for a breath. Now, if you hear the sound of a breath, the whole idea is that you just close the door, and then you should be able to hear their footsteps walk away. But if you don't hear a breath after being at the door for a couple seconds, shine your flashlight. And sometimes you can get to see this animation in which Bonnie or Chica end up going back around the corner, you sending them back to the end of the hall. Now, the whole AI and mechanic for this is based on this thing called movement opportunities. Now, if you're someone who has watched any sort of FNAF YouTuber or FNAF challenge YouTuber, probably understand the premise and the AI, or the understanding to the AI that is the movement opportunities. But to those who don't, I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of it real quick. So how do movement opportunities, I genuinely cannot speak to them. So how do movement opportunities exactly work? Well, in the first 5 nights of the first 4 games, the AI's movement opportunity, or the animatronics movement opportunity AI, is already set. However, whenever you get to the custom night, and to be fair, the same is also for the 6th night. I forgot there's also a 6th night in the first 4 games. But when you get to the point where you can actually do the custom night of a game, you can physically set the AI for the animatronics, anywhere between 1 and 20. So let's imagine that Nightmare Bonnie's AI is set to 12. Every 7 seconds, let's take 7 seconds for example. I don't know what the actual timer is in FNAF 4, but let's just take 7 seconds. Every 7 seconds, Bonnie's AI is going to randomly generate a number between 1 and 20. Here's the thing though. Say for the first time it generates a 6. Because 6 is between 1 and 12 and Bonnie's AI was set to 12, it means that Bonnie would pass the movement opportunity, meaning that Bonnie would take the next step forward, getting closer to you, the player. However, another 7 seconds passes by and Bonnie's AI randomly generates a number, that number being 17. Because of the fact that 17 is far greater than 12, and it simply is not between 1 and 12, it means that Bonnie would just end up staying there and would end up having to generate for another number 7 seconds later. I cannot talk for the life of me. Oh my days, this is starting to annoy me now. But yeah, you get the point, is that every 7 seconds he would generate a new number, and if the number is between 1 and 12, he would move. If it's not, he can't move. Now, this is what makes, now that I've explained this to you, it should make the idea of doing a all animatronics on 20 mode, it should start to kick in how difficult that sort of thing is. Because if all the animatronics are set to 20, that means that every 7 seconds, each one of the animatronics will move. They're guaranteed to move. And that's what makes stuff like Custom Night and FNAF 2 20 modes so difficult. It's the fact that every single animatronic will take their movement opportunity, because any number that they get will be between 1 and 20 or equal to 20, because their AI max set is 20. And now you get why the game's so difficult when you do 20 mode. Either way, now that I've explained that, hopefully in an easy enough way without effing up every 7 seconds, because I clearly cannot speak today, hopefully that now makes sense to you. Let's get on to night 5, which is where we get to meet a whole new animatronic on a whole. Now, in regards of how we deal with Bonnie and Chica, like I mentioned before, you run to a door, wait to hear a breathing sound. If you hear the breathing sound, close the door. And if you don't hear the breathing sound, use your flashlight. If you do hear a breathing sound, close your door until you hear their footsteps move away. Capiche? Nice. Now let's go into the real kicker, like I say again, being this new animatronic we meet in night 5 of FNAF 4. That being the one and only Nightmare Fredbear. Now, Nightmare Fredbear is honestly a king unto himself, because instead of Nightmare Fredbear working with the other 4 animatronics, Nightmare Fredbear decides, F it, I'ma work on my own. Why does he do that? Because he is now going to basically be acting as every single one of the 4 animatronics put into one. So Nightmare Fredbear ends up acting like Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Freddy, but just as one animatronic now. Now, how Nightmare Fredbear works is, firstly, let's talk about when he's in the room. See, when Nightmare Fredbear is in the room, how he works, or how he ends up in your room, is actually through a different animatronic, through a different mechanic. That mechanic being his laughing. See, Nightmare Fredbear, instead of being like Foxy, in which he just runs from side to side until he eventually ends up in your room, he will laugh. Now, when you hear him laugh, essentially this ends up telling you that he's in your room. Now, that can either be in your bed or that could be in the closet. However, it's on you to figure out firstly which one he's in, and then if he's on the bed, flash the flashlight on him the same way you would do with the Freddles, and if he's in the closet, close the closet on him until he disappears. The only difference with Fredbear and Foxy and Fredbear and Freddy is that if Fredbear ends up on the bed and you flashlight him and he goes, he will not stay in the bedroom. And same for the closet. If Fredbear ends up in the closet and you close the closet and you get rid of him, he will now end up back on the hallways. So that's the only difference between Fredbear and Foxy and Freddy, is that once he's in the bedroom, it doesn't mean he's going to stay there. Once you get rid of him, he will now end up back in the hallways. Now, there is actually a way for Fredbear to sometimes even fake his laughs, meaning that he could do the laughing soundtrack, but he actually won't end up in your bedroom. However, explaining the AI to this, honestly, like I already struggled. You heard me before, okay? I already struggled to do the AI stuff before. Explaining this one would be a whole other level to itself. So let's just leave this one out, all right? And let's just go on to how he works in the hallways. Now, in regarding to how Fredbear works in the hallways, it's a bit different to Bonnie and Chica, as you don't actually need to rely on hearing his breath as much as you need to his footsteps. Now, here's the thing. How Fredbear makes Night 5 more difficult is because not only is he, like again, 4 animatronics into one, and not only did I explain before that he can sometimes fake his laughs, making you waste time, but Fredbear's timings, especially at the doors, are more strict than they were before. Okay, more strict than Bonnie and Chica. You do not have as much time, and it's not as lenient on nights 1 through 4 as it is on night 5 when you're facing Fredbear alone. Now, how you have to deal with Fredbear at the hallways is you need to hear his footsteps. He'll constantly be running sort of like Foxy from side to side. Now, when you hear him at a certain hallway, you need to run to that said door. Now, instead of waiting for a breathing sound, you actually want to flash your flashlight down the hall. If you see him, close the door and close it quick, because if you take too long, he will just jump scare you. Like I say again, the timing is a lot more strict on this one than it is in the first 4 nights. Okay, he's not as lenient. And like I say again, he doesn't work exactly the same as Bonnie and Chica. Though you do still need hearing, in order to close the door, whether or not you need to close the door, sort of relies more on if you actually see him in the hallways. Like I say again, he does move quick, so close the door quickly. The thing is with Fredbear, as you'll hear in the audio, or as you hear if you ever play the game, is that he will sometimes try to fake you out. He'll go to one door to make you run to one door, then go to the other door, and then come back to the original door that you first started at. Fredbear is going to give you a run for your money, okay? He's gonna have you chasing him like he's a headless chicken. Well, no, like you're the headless chicken. But you get what I'm saying. The point is, he's gonna keep you on your toes, and you need to stay on your toes. Because like I say again, his timing is more strict. And then there's also Nightmare. Now, Nightmare is a whole other animatronic unto himself, and he works the exact same as Fredbear, but to be completely honest, there's no point me really explaining Nightmare, because Nightmare is more or less Nightmare Fredbear, but just with an even more strict timing. So if you thought Fredbear was already difficult, just imagine having to deal with Nightmare. It only gets worse from that point. Having explained what I enjoy so much about the game, and the overall game itself and how the game works, let's end with my favorite part of the game, or what I personally enjoy about the game the most. That being none other than the animatronics. Don't get me wrong, the map is pretty cool and whatnot, and in terms of where it is in the lore, all that stuff is cool. But I would be an idiot not to say that the animatronics is my favorite part of FNAF 4. The animatronics designs are so incredibly good. And I think on a whole, all of the FNAF 4 animatronics are probably the best in the franchise. On a whole, not speaking individual animatronics, but on a whole, they're genuinely better than like, I'd say like 80%, 90% of the FNAF games. Like, here's the thing, right? Say like FNAF 2, you have Withered Bonnie, and Withered Bonnie is a flipping incredible design. But then you also have Balloon Boy, and it's like Balloon Boy sort of kind of like meh, like, you know what I mean? Like Balloon Boy isn't anything special, but Withered Bunny looks incredible, and that's my thing. Is that on a whole, all the FNAF 4 animatronics, incredible. Like, if I'm being honest, I'd say that they're minimum like 7 out of 10, no lower than that, no lower than that. And here's my thing: my personal favorite animatronic is none other than Nightmare Fredbear. Okay, the fact that Nightmare Fredbear on night 5 ends up becoming all 5 animatronics as one, as well as his design, I think his design is 10/10, and I genuinely mean that. His design is just straight up incredible. This is where we're gonna wrap things up. And let me know, did you enjoy the Halloween app? Did you actually enjoy this? Did you? I'm sorry if this one ended up being a bit longer than my normal ones. It's just a case of, well, I thought I'd go a bit all out for it, and I thought I'd really explain what I enjoy about this. And like I said again, to be fair, I saved you a bullet here, because I could have really been talking about the FNAF lore and the timeline, but I thought, why not just talk about my favorite game within the franchise, that being none other than FNAF 4. And like I say again, though I effed up many times when talking, and that's going to be really annoying for me to edit, whether I decide to leave it in or not, it was still a blast to talk about. And for the first Halloween special, I'm going to take it as a success, alright? It's the first of many to come, so be prepared for it. Okay, so let's wrap up this however long video it is by saying this, okay? FNAF 4 will forever remain to be my favorite FNAF in the franchise. Happy Halloween, of course. I mean, it's the Halloween special, so it'd be dumb of me not to say Happy Halloween. Stay safe. And try actually dress for something Halloween related. I hate the fact that people dress up as anything for Halloween, even though it's not Halloween related. But that's a conversation and a video for another time. Either way, this has been your boy Genzo. Genie. This has been your boy Genie. And we will see you guys. We'll see you next month. Yeah.